Good morning, Metal Edgernet. Welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. And today we're looking at the latest album from Carnifex entitled World War X. This is the band's seventh studio album, and it marks a pretty big change in Carnifex's sound, style, aesthetic, and basic execution. Now, mind you, the band has made some steps in musical evolution since signing to Nuclear Blast Records, incorporating influences from across the modern death metal spectrum into their sound, as well as bringing in some subtle influences from the world of melodic and symphonic death metal, particularly on their recent EP, Bury Me in Blasphemy, although you can also hear some of those influences on their last studio album, Slow Death. But this is the most significant. I think this is finally the record where Carnifex, much like many of their deathcore peers from the late 2000s, are really straying away from the sound. Some of the roots still remain, but not to the point where I would even call this a deathcore record. I feel much more comfortable calling this an American death metal, groove metal record with a lot of European influence. I hear influence from black metal, I hear influence from melodic black metal specifically, a lot of synths, a lot of very dystopian, bleak themes. In fact, the entire record has a very apocalyptic vibe to it, dealing with the consequences of war and the destruction of humanity. It's inherently more mature as a result. The musicianship is sharper throughout. To put it very simply, to dismiss this as just another deathcore album from just another deathcore band would be a big mistake, because this is the band's boldest and most ambitious record to date, and I would even say their best, personally speaking. The Carnifex loyalists and the diehard fans might feel differently. I know that those early records are very, very fucking popular, and for the record, Carnifex has been one of the few deathcore bands that I actually consistently enjoy, so I won't knock you for preferring those records. But I will confidently reaffirm and stand by everything I've said, because I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with this record, because Carnifex got me an early copy. Picked this up from the boys at Summer Slaughter in Toronto earlier this week, and I've been jamming it quite a bit since then, analyzing and dissecting it and figuring out all of its twists and turns. Since we're on the topic, take a look at this. That is fucking stunning. So yeah, again, to reiterate, I'm pretty comfortable with how I feel about this record, and dismissing this as just another deathcore record is a mistake. And if you actually choose to sit down to this record, that mistake becomes abundantly clear right away on title track World War X, one of the most ferocious cuts on the record, one of the most ferocious cuts Carnifex have ever done. It's ominous and foreboding, it sets the tone and the concept of the entire record, and it's also got this unstoppable blackened death metal spirit bellowing underneath it, constantly clawing to get on top. It almost crosses over into being kind of hellishly over the top in its most bombastic moments, but over the top in the way that we see classic Slayer. It's just got this really nightmarish, hellish, devilish energy behind it. The attitude, the energy, the atmosphere is immediately established and carries through to the rest of the record. Take, for instance, following track, Visions of the End, every bit as hellish in scope and sound, while also leaning more on some of the more classic deathcore sounds and formulas that I think old school fans are really going to be looking for on this, without feeling like a retread. In fact, they still sound pretty inventive and fresh here, thanks to some really great riffing, thanks to some really fantastic drum work, tight as fucking drums across the entire record, may I add. I really love this Infernal Darkness, which is also one of the more multifaceted tracks on the record, with sprawling keyboard sections and vicious, blackened, pummeling choruses. It's rich and dramatic and has some really interesting gothic flavors near the end of the track, and I think it makes for yet another album highlight. I also really enjoy No Light Shall Save Us, a collaboration with Elisa White Glues of Arch Enemy. When this song came out, it was dismissed as being kind of a generic by-the-books cut by MetalSucks.net in particular, and to some extent, yeah, it's not quite as inventive as some of the other tracks on this record, but I don't know, man, it's still brutal, it's still uncompromising, it's still powerful, It's got this really interesting vocal contrast between Scott Ian Lewis and Alyssa White. I think that they play off each other really well, and I think she's got a really strong chorus near the end of this as well. It's still every bit as menacing and apocalyptic as every other track on this record, so even if it isn't the most insanely original piece in the world, I don't fucking care. It's fucking good. Isn't that what matters at the end of the day? And honestly, there's not a single dud on here. I do think it's safe to say that the second half of the record isn't quite as strong as the first half, but you're still getting a lot of really great songs. There's a really cool collaboration with solo guitarist Angel Vivaldi, for instance. I really like Brushed by the Wings of Demon as well, particularly in its final moments, introducing these really grand, almost Avenged Sevenfold-esque twin guitar harmonies and solos. And on top of all that, on top of no filler, no duds, it also ends at an extremely sharp 35 minutes long. Thank fucking God for it, too! By comparison, Human Target, the recent Thy Art Is Murder record, also wraps up at 38 minutes, but feels significantly longer, significantly more bloated, because the band consistently recycles and reuses formulas, riffs, entire sections of songs. Whereas Carnifex is on a mission to reinvent themselves, to be darker, to be more mature, to be more modern, to be better musicians as well, obviously. I mean, I've already mentioned the incredible drumming across the record, but the guitar work is really great too. The guitars have this really cool, brutal, kind of Cannibal Corpse meets Lamb of God dynamic to them. Scott Ian Lewis's vocals are fantastic as well. I don't think he's ever sounded quite this blood-curdlingly evil before. I'm honestly going to give this thing a 4 out of 5, leaning towards a 4.5 out of 5. It is a seriously great fucking record. They're most ambitious, they're most dynamic, they're most original, and they're best. As I said before, I don't really know where the loyalists and diehard fans will stand on this, but I've talked to deathcore fans in general who have not enjoyed the more progressive and experimental releases from other modern deathcore bands. As a result, I have to assume that maybe those older records would appeal to you more than World War X. But that being said, World War X also retains just enough of the deathcore roots that I think that those fans will still be pretty entertained and pretty excited about this record, and I think it will open them to the broader spectrums of extreme metal as well, because it has all of these new influences from black metal and symphonic metal and modern death metal and melodic death metal. Anyone who's been enjoying the modern extreme metal sound is going to find a lot to enjoy here. Anyone who's a fan of modern death metal is going to find a lot to enjoy here. This would also make for a really interesting introductory record to a lot of modern death metal and deathcore and extreme music if you know someone who really wants to get into this genre and is looking for a pretty good gateway record. They might find it overwhelming, as I noted before, maybe even over the top, but over the top in a classic Slayer kind of way, just being so hellish and evil and uncompromising in that sense. So yeah, mad props to the guys in Carnifex. I love the energy, I love the concept, I love the lyrics as well. I haven't really talked a lot about lyrics. The lyrics do a really good job at establishing this concept and making it feel all the more potent and real and powerful and dark. From start to finish, it's punishing, it's dynamic, it's kind of everything we want from modern extreme metal without laying too much into any of the tropes and cliches. It feels fresh and new for the band, and again, I think it's their best record to date. 4 out of 5, so close to that 4.5 out of 5, but we're not quite just there. But who knows? Maybe that next Carnifex record will be, so who knows? 4 out of 5, check this thing out. I promise you won't be disappointed. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, and you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.